Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a special Facebook Live here on this rainy Thursday morning. I am sitting with Dr. McCarthy from the Summit School, and the reason we are here today is because we're going to talk about executive functioning, or executive function. Am I having that term correct?
Executive functions.
Functions, okay. This is a really important topic and one that actually I was not well aware of until we discussed doing this talk, and so this is why we do these, because it's so informative. You have so much knowledge. It's just important for everyone to have this awareness of executive functions and how much we use it in everyday life, whether you're, from teeny weeny all the way up till, you're old and gray. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. McCarthy for having us here again, and I'm going to let her really take it away. I know that the reason that you're having this is you have a symposium coming up on Saturday. So this Saturday, the 23rd of March, and again, it's another one of your all-day talks and workshops, correct? And is it for parents? Is it for family members? Is it for children? Is it all of the above?
Well, it's for, I would say older children would benefit, teens and college students, but it's for parents, it's for teachers, it's for people who struggle with just managing all of the competing demands of their day. And it will help people understand if they struggle with things that can't be measured, like, why can't I get work done? Or why do I feel so flustered? This talk will really help put things in perspective and help people understand, help teachers understand, and help parents understand why kids can't clean up their rooms.
Okay, so I guess I put the cart before the horse here, talking about why people should come to the symposium. Can we go back and
Sure.
What is executive functions, and what are the important? Why is it important, and how
Sure.
does it affect your day-to-day life?
Sure, and great beginning question. So executive functions are things that we use with respect to how we process information to get through our day.
Okay.
So it's organization, it's planning, it's inhibition. In other words, I better stop saying that because it's not working for me. It is initiation of tasks. Stop procrastination. I better get started. Otherwise, I'm not going to meet that deadline. It's working memory, how you remember everything that's coming at you so that you can work with it and either participate in a conversation or do something with the information. It's flexibility in thinking. And it also has to do with also regulation of emotions.
Okay.
So when you get overwhelmed, do you pop? Do you withdraw? Or do you do some self-talk to say, okay, this is going to be all right. I'm going to do this first, that second, this third. So it is a series of functions that help us get through the day. And what happens is sometimes we're really good at some functions and sometimes not so good at others. So if you ask my staff, initiation is not one of my better functions because I am a last-minute woman.
Okay.
And I am able to laugh about it, and I get things done. But for people who like to do things ahead of time, I can be a source of stress, for which I am very sorry. But so in typical people, it's something that you embrace. It's something that you kind of can joke about, but it kind of explains your isms, right? But then there's the more significant and the more serious understanding of executive functions, because when people struggle with several components of executive functions, it can be devastating. And so it exists on a continuum.
And you say devastating, excuse the interruption, just meaning that it affects all aspects of their day, of their life, of relationships, of just how they relate to the world around them, correct? That's what you mean by that?
Relationships, academics, and it can be very stressful. So, for example, you can have a very gifted child who has really good skills and really good knowledge, but if they can't manage their day, if they can't plan, if they can't work their plan, if they can't initiate activities, these are the kids that come home and look at their homework and say, oh, I'm not doing that, and then get to school the next day and they get zeros on everything. Or the child that says, I did that homework, and it's shoved somewhere in a book, but unless you produce it, you can't find it. It's the child who gets anxious because there are so many competing things happening as the day goes on that it's overwhelming.
Okay.
So it could be the child that holds it together all day in school and then gets home and just breaks down. It could be the preschooler who just can't regulate their emotions. So when they're on a task, like they're running around and they're asked to stop, and then they're asked to stop again, they might not can't, or when something happens that upsets them, they can't get over it quickly, so they can't regulate their emotions. So we can see issues with executive function early on, and then it goes through life. So we see it in the preschoolers. Maybe they can't regulate their emotions. Maybe they don't get circle time a month into preschool. You know what circle time is. You know that you sit there. You know you're going to do the calendar. You know that you've already put things in your cubbies. But there are children when a month into preschool and they're not getting with the group plan. You have to start watching them.
Okay.
So, or kids that just can't seem to remember from one second to the next. So it could be executive function. As they get into school, children who struggle with executive functions may or may not have academic difficulties. But if they also neurobiologically have academic difficulties, like with reading decoding, which is figuring out the words, or reading comprehension, or even math, the executive function is like another whammy put on top of those struggles with skills. It makes it even harder, even though they're bright or they have this really good problem solving. It is very, very unobvious, is that a word? Or inobvious?
Yes.
But if you understand executive functions, you can spot it in a heartbeat.
Okay. Now, when we spoke last time, we talked about learning differences in children. Specifically, we were talking about dyslexia, but we did talk about how their brains, work differently, and the learning differences in a school setting. I think we specifically were talking about school. So executive functions for children who are struggling with this, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're having learning differences. Is it a precursor to that, or is it just a normal development, that they go through? Are there resources to help children, help parents, help families to recognize and then?
So you've asked me a few questions.
I have.
So,
Sorry.
So I'm gonna try to go through that. Do executive functions exist on a developmental continuum? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
You expect a 6-year-old to be so organized, but then a 10-year-old you expect. Okay. So by the time a child gets to 5th grade, you would expect a backpack that's reasonably organized, that they can put their homework, that they can put some systems into place. Just because they've been in school and they've been exposed to that, and maybe the home is organized, but despite anybody's best efforts, mom, dad, school, 5th grade, the child is, that Charlie Brown pig pen with all the stuff coming out of the book bag, and I say that with love in my heart.
Yeah.
So it does exist on a developmental continuum.
Okay.
So you can definitely have expectations. But you would expect, that children can keep their stuff together that's appropriate for their age level.
Okay.
So you would expect a 6-year-old to keep their things together as expected as they go through the grades. And certainly by the time somebody gets into high school, they should have it all going on. They should have their notebooks organized. They should have their studies. They should know exactly what they have to do when they have to do it and plan for it.
Okay.
But not so much the case. So back to, is it a learning difference? Yeah, it's a kind of learning difference. I'm going to give a resource now that's a really important resource that can help you understand the neurobiological underpinnings. So anytime we're going to talk, I'm always going to give you the research and how the brain is wired. So the Dyslexia Foundation, which is www.yesread.org, is an organization that promotes science and brings it to teachers and parents. And so if you go on their website, you'll see what we do. I work with them as my fun part-time, volunteer work. Some people, go to the beach.
Well, I'm sure you're
I hang out with the Dyslexia Foundation, but somebody did tell me to get a life once, but that's okay. But at any rate, so we just had a day-long conference in Los Angeles on February 14, I think it was, or
Okay.
15. And if you go to the website, pretty soon, in probably by the end of April, the videos of each individual talk on executive function will be up.
Wonderful. Okay.
And so the first talk is about the brain
Okay.
and the executive function networks.
Mhm.
And it talks, and Dr. Cutting talks about how executive function is involved with just about everything we do. And each talk is an hour long, and it's an hour long clip, so you can invest an hour at a time
Oh, that's
in
great.
learning
Okay.
about it.
And it's yesread.org.
Yesread.org.
And then we'll connect.
Correct.
And we'll put those links in the comments as well, so make sure that you can access them.
So, hot off the presses, within the past few years, we're really looking at the brain organization with respect to executive functions.
Mhm.
So, it's real. Some people will say, oh, everybody has executive dysfunction, it's just the new fad. No, it's real. We
Mhm.
see it in the brain from the brain science. And it affects, and my point is it affects everything. So when we see children that really struggle with reading, decoding, we're starting to think about flexibility.
Mhm.
So your ability to go along a problem-solving set, and if it doesn't work, you go, oh, that's not working, I'm going to try something else. And finally you get to something that works. But if you're inflexible, the rigid persist with a strategy that has failed.
Mhm.
And so we're thinking that the children that are very deeply dyslexic struggle with linguistic flexibility, and that's research that was just starting to get into, and Summit is participating in some
That's
of that
wonderful.
research generation. When we talk about reading comprehension, so a child can decode well, can have really good understanding of vocabulary at the oral level, can read and comprehend sentences, can read and comprehend short paragraphs, but as soon as they have to comprehend several paragraphs or a dense article, they're lost in the sauce.
Mhm.
They just can't remember. And so that's the working memory
Okay.
part of it. So executive functions can affect reading comprehension.
Mhm.
Executive functions can also affect math. So when children struggle with math, we want to know, is it a basic neurobiological difficulty with understanding numbers and quantity?
Mhm.
Or is it that they get that, but they can't remember how to do things? So when a child seems to be doing really well with math thinking and moving along in early grades with math, and they get to long division, and it's just too many steps and they can't remember the steps. Or dividing fractions, which seems counterintuitive, right? But when they can't remember those procedures, it's not necessarily a math disability because they don't understand concepts of math. It's more that their procedural memory
Okay.
is not so great. So executive functions academically play a big toll. Executive functions also plays a big toll on written language.
Mhm.
So you can write a sentence, but when you have to write an essay, or when you have to pull stuff together to write a report, a research report, it takes a big chunk of brain capacity for organization. So if you're just writing a few paragraphs, like a persuasive essay, you have to think about your essay. You have to think about what's your thesis statement, what your persuasive arguments, how you embellish those arguments, and how you're going to end it. And with that, you have to think about the vocabulary. Then you have to think about how do you put those words in a good sentence. And if the sentence isn't saying exactly what you wanted to say, then you have to rethink the nuances. And oh yeah, there's spelling. So if you think about writing and all of the brain functions, the executive functions that it takes to write, it's a wonder any of us can write. And even we can say that executive functions for some people takes its toll on oral language. So you pushed my button and I'm running off at the mouth because
No, this is all so fascinating.
but
and how
if you struggle with executive functions, sometimes it's hard for you to put your thoughts together. So you talk and you use a lot of things and you knows and he's and she's and it's that don't really relate to the main topic. So executive functions is the master blaster. It basically helps you get through everything, and it's regulated by the frontal lobe of the brain, which is right here. So people know that when I say to them, I have frontal lobe envy, that's kind of like the biggest compliment I could give anybody, because it means that they're able to manage all the pieces in their life to get through their day. So I just explained the academic, but then there's just the get through your day. So I come into work with a list of things mentally, because people who are more organized would have a list. It's in my head. And it's my ism, and I'm okay with it.
Well, in this day and age, is it a written list?
Or
Do you have
it's
it on
on your phone, right.
Or, you know.
So some people really need that, and I keep it in my head, but then I get into work and I go, oh, that's just not going to work. Okay, we're going to juggle this, and I'm okay with it. But there are some people, when they have that list to do, and they get into work or they get to school, and that list isn't going to work, because they don't have that flexibility to juggle that list around and be okay with if something on that list doesn't work, it's stressful. So executive function also helps you manage your life and the way you interact with people. So it's huge.
It's huge, absolutely.
Yeah. And so these are all the things that Dr. Dawson is going to talk about all day on Saturday.
Okay, so I was just about to, so Dr. Dawson is coming. She's going to be the keynote for the symposium. Will she be doing exercises? Will she be giving out advice? Will she be doing?
She will probably be sharing some of her very pragmatic work. So she has in her book, and I'm guessing she'll hand it out too. She has, you can take your own executive function test.
Oh, great.
Which is kind of fun.
Those are always fun to take,
So you kind of figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And so if you know that maybe you don't initiate tasks too quickly, but you're working with somebody who really likes to initiate a task really fast, because you want to be a good coworker, you try to, mend your evil ways and start a little earlier. If you know that you get stressed over things, you kind of share with somebody, look, I get stressed when something is not working well for me, when things don't go. So help me work through this, and it's not you, it's just me trying to manage. So you can manage the way you work with people, you can manage the way you teach children. Older children can manage the way they interact with their teachers and say, this is what I need, and when this doesn't happen, then I won't produce the way you're expecting me. And college students with executive function, that's huge. If they struggle with executive functions, you've got a syllabus, you've got 4 or 5 classes. Nobody's looking at you. You have to manage your stuff. So if we say manage your stuff is the quote for the day. So executive functions affects everybody. And then, look at marriage. There are some people, in a marriage, because people say you married the opposite so that you kind of fulfill what you don't have. So there are people in a marriage where if one person is like a cyclone and has no clue, and the other person is very, very organized. So unless they decide how to work together, it can be a source of trouble. So it's just the way it works.
Great.
It's a fascinating topic, and it's real, and the science is supporting it. Back in the late 1990s, the only time we talked about executive functions was with traumatic brain injury. But then we started, but then we started realizing that before we had the brain science, there are these kids that just can't get things together, and they get anxious, they can't initiate, they're not flexible. So we started developing these precepts, and now the neuroscience is kind of supporting it.
Wonderful.
It's fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's so great that you not only have the knowledge here, but that you have gone to conferences and that you're putting one on here this Saturday. I mean, I just think that to be able to bring that experience and to really help people just by offering it, because again, the symposium, it's open to everyone, and you can pre-register at is it thesummitSchool.org?
You can call, or you can go to the summitschool.org.
Okay. And is there a fee for?
There is, and I don't know.
Okay. It's probably on the website, so you can get all the information there.
That's a managing the detail thing.
But no, it's just and for you taking the time to speak with me today, I just so appreciate it, and I always come away from these just feeling like, oh, I'm gonna go look that up, because it's fascinating. Good. It really is. And
in Dr. Dawson's talk, she's going to talk about how schools can support students that struggle with executive function, and how parents can support students.
Okay.
And
always good information.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great information, and once you understand it, it's very helpful to understand yourself, your spouse,
well, anyone, make
your
it work.
children.
Yep.
It's just how we manage life.
Yep, exactly. The make it work moment.
Exactly,
You know, and it's just figuring out life and the journey, and every day is a different day, and
Absolutely.
so it's wonderful. So again, thank you so much
You're
for
so
having
welcome.
us,
Thank you.
and thank you all for joining us today. I hope everyone stays dry on this rainy Thursday, and hopefully we'll be seeing you later. Thanks. Bye.